So I'm standing here at Bushy Run battlefield in southwestern Pennsylvania. With the conclusion of the French and Indian War in 1760, the treaty that was signed effectively ousted the French from this part of the country, and the British cut a deal with the Indians saying that we wouldn't allow our settlers to push any further west. The Indians had spent 100 years getting pushed further and further west out of their homeland. That being said, you can't stop progress. British settlers did continue to push west and settle this area, bumping into Indians and not living up to that treaty. The British government, having been saddled with an enormous amount of debt from the French and Indian War and the 7 Years' War around the world, didn't have an interest in paying to garrison troops in this part of the country. And so there were no troops to enforce the treaty to keep settlers out. There were also no troops here to do trade with Indians. The Indians had lost all their trade with the French. British weren't interested in trading with the Indians, and so the small garrisons and British settlers were harassed, and as one would think, by the Indians here. In 1763, there's an Ottawan chief, Pontiac, that does a remarkable thing and brings together a bunch of unallied tribes throughout the Great Lakes and the Ohio country, southwestern Pennsylvania, and up through western New York, in one final push to kick the British and the settlers out of this part of the country. They say, this is the treaty, we cannot stand for this, we're not going to move any further west. The followers of Pontiac have a remarkable string of victories in the spring of 1763, burning over 80 forts, villages, and stockades throughout the Great Lakes, southwestern Pennsylvania, and western New York area, and lay siege to Fort Detroit, Fort Pitt, and Fort Niagara, three of the largest forts in North America. And it's quite remarkable to think that there were this many Indians that had risen up and were fighting against these British strongholds, if you've ever been to any of those forts. So the British Lord Amherst, who commands all the British troops in North America, sends one of his guys, a Swiss-born officer named Henry Bouquet, to push west from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, to Fort Ligonier, and then on to Pittsburgh to help with the siege there, help kick the Indians out of the siege. On August 5th, 1763, Bouquet's line of some 900 men, 300 some pack horses and wagons and so on, is ambushed here first day on the other side of this tree line here, is surprised. It's heavy casualties, and at the end of that day, Bouquet writes to Amherst and says, all is lost, I'm sorry, we're not going to relieve the siege, and so on. He pulls all of his men up to this hill where this marker is today, and there are these concrete versions of it, but he creates a oval redoubt of the flour bags, and piles in all of the wounded and the dead from around, and prepares for what he thinks is the siege the next day. August 6th, it does happen again atop of this hill right here, all the way around. It's a tree line. Today it's been stripped from its original trees. He's surrounded by Indians. Nobody knows exactly how many. Some estimates say 400. The way the Indian style of fighting was sort of darting in and out of the woods, and so sometimes it was hard to account for how many Indians there truly were. But he's surrounded here. What he does is he takes the Royal Highlander Regiment, who are this interesting group of Scottish soldiers fighting here in North America on behalf of the British during this period, and he feints a retreat from the line. The Indians see all the British running away. They think that all is lost for the British. The Indians charge in to the British line, and those same retreating British turns out to be a feint retreat, and they charge back out through the woods into the Indians, surprising the Indians and chasing them away in a really rare instance of some quick thinking from some British officers, actually beating the Indians at their own game. From here, Bouquet gathers up his men. He goes back. He eventually makes it to Fort Pitt, 20 miles away. He rests up, and then he does a final push of British troops from Fort Pitt into today's modern-day Ohio, crushes what's left of the rebellion, and effectively ends any chance that the Indians have of rising up against the colonists. I mean, it's a really remarkable piece of history that's really understudied and undervalued.